Hello, it's Jimmy. Today I want to talk about why I felt it was necessary to build wealth. I think we all grow up having some childhood fantasy about how nice it would be to be wealthy someday, maybe sliding down a pile of coins in a vault in your backyard or some other such nonsense. At some point you kind of realize that that's not really going to happen and you just move on with life. I like to maybe blame the lack of financial education on why people don't try to attain wealth in their lifetime. And I've realized it's not a lack of financial education, but really a misdirection and a lot of bad information about what it means to become wealthy. A lot of the information out there is aimed at keeping people broke, desperate, hopeless, and confused. Well, I'm here to say that building wealth is not only possible, but it's necessary so that you can have options. One thing I needed to do to kind of shift my perspective on building wealth was to filter out all the messaging that was coming to me. And I got rid of anything that was saying that, first of all, that wealth creation and building was not possible. I just didn't want to hear that anymore. So once I was left with only positive messages about building wealth, doing it responsibly, one of the things that was interesting was discerning what was something that was trying to sell me a product or service, and other messages that were maybe more positive, but they were kind of a toxic positivity. A lot of messages about manifesting wealth, prosperity gospel type things, those very quickly went to the wayside. There was some other transactional type messaging, such as, you need to give to get. And I kind of knew that I needed to do the work myself, and there were no get rich quick schemes. Once that was all distilled down, of course, the how part, not as difficult because it's eliminating debt, save, and invest. But why would I want to do that? Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but he who gathers little by little will increase it. Now, going back to the why, I wasn't really looking back at my childhood fantasy and trying to fulfill some silly dreams about having a bunch of money and doing weird stuff. But it was more that I didn't want to be dependent on others for my future. We were told that pretty much everything you need in life, you need to have leverage to get. And I certainly don't believe that, but I did at one point think that that was the only way people could get by in life. Sometimes would look around as a kid at how expensive cars were. I think we had a 1987 Ford Escort station wagon that may have cost around $8,000. And to a 7-year-old, that is unattainable. That's so much money. How can anybody afford that? As an adult, I realized I didn't want to live that way. I didn't want to have debt in my life. I didn't want to owe people for the things that I wanted. I certainly didn't want to owe money for the things that I needed. Now, I was surrounded by poor people growing up, and not necessarily poor in the sense of finances, although that was the case. It was more the poor mindset, the little man can't get ahead type of mentality. Now, these were very good people. They were generally very nice and generous folk, but they had a strong external locus of control, thinking that they themselves could not break out of the cycles of life, maybe failing to notice the things, the choices that they've made in life that put them where they're at, and not realizing that they could make different choices to have different and better outcomes. These people were perpetually poor, always behind, just not really getting ahead in life, and not necessarily trying to climb the corporate ladder, but maybe even just staying afloat. The one thing that was common with all of these folks is they were exclusively dependent on debt just to live life day to day, let alone get ahead. Once I realized then that I needed to get out of that mindset and cycle and understand, yes, building wealth is possible, and I learned how to do it. Again, kind of searching the why Well, I don't want to be dependent on others. I don't want to be a slave to lenders. That's no way to live. But why in the future would I want to be wealthy? Well, the thing is, I didn't really intend to be wealthy. I wanted to eliminate debt and save and invest enough to just be okay. Wasn't really looking to build a giant portfolio. Well, one day it occurred to me that I actually was going to be wealthy. There was really no turning the ship around at that point. The power of compound interest, living on less than I made, saving and investing the rest, it really started to take shape. It didn't happen all at once, though. It was a gradual build. Well, I did the reverse to get rid of the debt. I gathered the debt little by little, but to get rid of it, I just kind of sliced it, diced it, and got rid of it very quickly. That helped me realize that the debt that I had accumulated over life was of no use to me. It wasn't helping me with my future. But now doing the reverse, saving and investing that money, but not really realizing what that was building up to. Even though it's taken a little while to get to the point where I am with my finances, I think it's good to build wealth slowly because you get an appreciation for where you've come and where you're going. And at different stages of wealth building, you get more knowledge and you learn how to be responsible with your finances and understand that it really is for the future you. Delaying gratification is going to serve you well. But I think the biggest thing for me about why it's necessary to build wealth is just to not be dependent on a system or on others. Now, it's good to be interdependent. You want to help people. That's a good thing. Other people may want to help you. When you need that, let them help you. It's a good thing. This is how we're designed to have this interplay with each other. And however, I don't want to be dependent on others for the things that I need when I'm older that I can take care of. Meaning, if I have the money to do what I need to stay healthy, live comfortably, not outrageously. I'm not going to be on a yacht with some servants. I'm not talking about that. Maybe not being dependent on, well, let's say systems. When I factor in what I'm going to have for actual retirement, we'll say the nominal retirement age, I don't ever factor in Social Security. I don't think it will not be there, but I just am not going to be dependent on it. I'm taking charge of that for myself just in case it's not there. If it is, great, that's gravy. And hopefully I spend that money responsibly. But keep in mind, Social Security was never meant to be a retirement program. It was simply a safety net because widows were living too long and they needed something to keep them out of the breadlines. The other system I'd never want to become dependent on again is debt and having debt instruments to get by in life. I don't think that that's a very healthy option either. And it makes my skin crawl, really, to think about a lot of older folks that have a ton of debt. They still have a mortgage on their house after retirement and owing money on their cars and not having anything built up for generational wealth. When I look at what they could have done with that money and the resources that they were gifted over life, being a responsible steward is another motivation, another why. If I'm entrusted with these things now, let's keep that momentum. Let's continue to be a good steward, continue to learn what to do with the blessings in life. And that can be not just financially, anything. If you have good health, if you have a skill, continue to use that and nurture that. I'm kind of focused just on money on this channel, so it seems like that's all I think about in life, but I assure you I'm a little bit more well-rounded than just that. We'll continue to talk about more of the financial aspect, but it applies to everything in life. So again, my message is you need to build wealth. You, meaning you, building means you need to build it, not just get rich overnight. And you need to do it so that you are taken care of. So you don't have to be dependent on others or systems. Now, that doesn't mean that you just cut people out of your life, unless they're terribly toxic folk, but just easing the financial burden that you would otherwise have to place on others when you can help that now for your future. That's the why I'm talking about. Well, that's all I've got to say on why you need to build wealth. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you're having a great day.